This is a big day in the contentious history of abortion in America.
Millions of children lose their right to life every year because of abortion. In Texas, we work to save those lives.
The strictest bans on abortion in the country, and it goes into effect in the state of Texas starting today. It bans abortions as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy.
Back in May, Texas passed a law known as SB 8. Prior to about 6 weeks of pregnancy, where some cardiac activity can be detected. If cardiac activity can be detected, then under the law, the abortion cannot be performed. And again, that's around the 6 week or so mark since the last menstrual period. Many women will have only actually been pregnant for a couple of weeks at that point, and subject to a medical emergencies exception, but without any rape or incest exception, all abortions after about that point are prohibited. What's novel about the Texas law is that the prohibition isn't enforced by state authorities the way an abortion ban would typically be enforced. Instead, any person can file a lawsuit against either an abortion provider or anyone who aided or abetting the securing of an abortion, and can receive damages beginning at $10,000 if they are successful. So it's a ban, but it's a ban enforced by private parties. It's any person really anywhere who suspects an individual has obtained an abortion can initiate this legal action. We should say that the law on its face exempts the women who obtain abortions from being sued. So it's really about kind of everyone around the women. Now, since the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade in 1973, no state has successfully prohibited abortion. So states can and do regulate abortion extensively, but what is clear under existing law is that states cannot ban abortion outright prior to fetal viability, which is 22, 23, 24 weeks of pregnancy. So this ban is a much, much more sweeping ban than any that has gone into effect since Roe. So for the last 50 years, no state has done what Texas has done here, which is effectively to prohibit virtually all abortions. I think for most people in Texas who wish to obtain abortions, they're not going to be able to do so unless they find out immediately that they are pregnant and act immediately to secure one of the now probably very few available appointments for a termination in the state of Texas. Women are still able to travel out of state to obtain abortions in states in which abortion is permitted, beyond the 6 week mark, which is of course every state other than Texas at this point. But of course that will have a profoundly disproportionate impact in that, women with the resources to travel out of state will be able to do so and to obtain abortions, and low-income women, disproportionately women of color who have already multiple children, who may be working jobs that don't allow them time off, are going to be without any recourse, and so will be functionally unable to access legal abortion in the state of Texas for the most part. I think that to the extent that individuals are seeking to obtain medication abortion, right? So pills that will induce an abortion from out of state, it's not clear to me that that violates SB 8. So that actually I think may well be permitted by SB 8. And one thing that is complicated is if that medication abortion that is self-administered fails, women will be in a very difficult position if they go to a clinic in Texas they're past the 6 week mark, and at that point they may be seeking to complete an abortion that has already somewhat occurred. Texas providers may not be able to perform that procedure consistent with the terms of this law. So at that point, women may be forced to carry to term what is now a very high-risk pregnancy because in the state of Texas there are no alternatives. Certainly the proponents of the bill have been quite explicit about their desire to dramatically reduce, if not end entirely, abortion in the state of Texas. And I think the sort of broader goal would be to end abortion nationwide. State legislators who oppose abortion have been emboldened by this new Supreme Court to reframe their arguments against abortion. And so they're no longer talking primarily about women's health and kind of protecting women's informed decision-making, but instead have shifted to rhetoric that really is grounded in fetal life. This is the idea that an abortion terminates a potential life, and that the state has an interest in that fetal life that is much stronger than a woman's interest in her, bodily autonomy and medical decision-making, and that with those two interests sort of in the balance, the state is permitted to privilege or prioritize the interest in fetal life over, other decision-making kind of autonomy interests that a woman might possess. The Supreme Court has before it a case out of Mississippi that is not as extreme as the Texas case. In terms of the ban, it's a 15-week ban rather than a 6-week ban. It does permit more access to abortion for more women in Mississippi, but the state in that case has asked the Supreme Court explicitly to overturn its precedents in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And I think Mississippi might well succeed in that effort. And if that's the case, by this coming June, the Supreme Court may well have announced that Roe v. Wade is no longer the law of the land, that there is no constitutionally protected right to terminate a pregnancy prior to viability. States like Texas and Mississippi, which have, walked up to the edge of a complete ban, but haven't actually tried to implement complete bans, might well move to do that. Complete bans may be subject to narrow exceptions, potentially not. And then I think there could be another sort of set of frontiers in these legal fights where opponents of abortion, having succeeded in overturning Roe, might take the next step, which is seeking to have the Supreme Court recognize that a fetus is a constitutionally protected subject. If a fetus has a constitutional right to life, then no state could permit abortion to occur legally. But we're not there yet, but I do think that a lot of people who watch this space think that that is the end game.